So we are episode 42, and I think it's been a while since you've been on.
It's been a bit.
It's been a bit.
Yeah.
He was avoiding me.
Yes.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
I'm pain avoidant. So.
But we had been talking for a while about doing an episode on cottages. And it's actually timely because I'm having Kim O'Grady from Chestnut Park, who runs their Huntsville office, back at the end of the month to talk about the spring season. I actually had her on last fall when the market was, that's the best way I can put it. And her predictions were that 2024 was going to be about going back to the normal way of buying a cottage, which people came up north and it took them 6 months, maybe a couple years to buy a cottage. That's actually not what I'm seeing right now, and it's only February. There was a cottage on my lake, 3-bedroom, broadloom in places. It was a nice piece of land, but close to the road, close to the public beach, which we all know we wouldn't want. High traffic area, and it sold conditional in 8 days.
Wow.
It was under $1 million.
Okay.
It's only a 3-bedroom. It has it's like one floor. There's no basement. There's no upstairs.
But that's a great cottage value, right?
It's a great price point.
Yeah.
Nothing. I mean, I have a beautiful cottage in Muskoka that will come back out. We had no showings because no one was even in the market, but it also was in that $1 million price range. So I think it's timely talking about people who are kind of on the cusp. I was talking to someone else. They were like, people who didn't want to do it last year are going to be back with a vengeance. As they say, there's only so long a child can stare at a toy and not buy it, right? So,
by the way, I'm going to accuse you of something now. So you're
first he avoids me, and now he's accusing me.
It's an accusation, and it's very Muskoka centric. So for the last couple of years, the Thunder Bay Law Association has invited me to lecture on real estate matters for them
in Thunder Bay.
Yeah.
Are you trying to equate Thunder Bay to Muskoka? Welcome to our cottage edition with Joel Kadish.
So I'm not, but it's really interesting there because all over Ontario, they don't call them cottages; they actually call them camps because they use them for hunting and fishing, and they really just and they literally just buy.
So in Thunder Bay, they're called camps,
and they literally just buy them to have a piece of land. Maybe there's a bunkie on them. So the perspective is that in a lot of remote places in Ontario, people also buy cottages that are, that really harken back to cottages, not like these full-blown homes with tennis courts and hot tubs and that are not winterized,
or the ones where they have a staff on site all
absolutely to
summer
service the pickleball courts, right? So cottage,
and throw $25,000 dinner parties every weekend.
Exactly. So
by the way, I'm available anytime someone wants to invite me.
By the way, my tagline is, I don't want to own a cottage. I want friends with them. Because there's nothing better than being invited up for the weekend, right? But who wants that? Who wants to manage it? It's terrible. Oh, no. All the snow on the roof?
What are we, in 1932? They build cottages so that they can handle the snow. This is great. Joel and my ADD is all over the place. But I remember we bought our very first cottage, and and of course, no one's going to say, no, I'm not going to take your money to take the snow off your roof.
Of course.
So I had this guy up there at that time, and I was like, oh, I heard it snowed a lot. Can you go? And he's like, no problem. Anyway, our neighbor who had owned cottages forever, great guy from Oshawa, worked the line, real salt of the earth guy, comes by, always made fun of us, right? Like my husband, who wouldn't put together the basketball net, paid someone to do it. He was ridiculed him. And he was like, what are you doing? He goes, they build homes to handle snow on roofs. Who are you kidding me?
Shovel.
He's like, you don't need a shovel. He goes, they don't collapse because of the snow. Anyway, all that to be said, yes, listen, but it's a labor of love. I always say to people, they're like, oh, it's so far and you have to drive. And I said, if you're worried about the drive to a cottage, and by the way, if you're thinking about a cottage, I will tell you, here's the ugly part of it. You need to have a lifestyle in which you can go to the cottage when you can avoid the traffic.
Yeah. So when
If you're sitting
is
in
that
the
like
400,
Thursday?
not necessarily, but if you're sitting on the 400 Friday at 5 o'clock after you get off work, or you can leave the office, and you're coming back on Sunday to put your kids to bed, you will want to jump off a ledge. There is no question. And in fact, by the way, when we bought our cottage, my husband said to me, I will not buy anything if I have to go up the 400 to get there. So Muskoka was actually, not that we could afford it at that time. We did not get anything up, nothing up the 400. And that's why we looked at the Kawarthas and Halliburton area.
Yeah. That's all
But
I
you
need.
should have a lifestyle where, and by the way, now with COVID and people working hybrid and say, I can work up there on Thursday, so I'm going to go up on a Thursday.
With school age kids, it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But in the summer, most people, we have a year round, right? In the summer, fine. But it's something to think about, right? And if you do have school age children, so they go to camp Monday to Thursday, maybe they don't go to camp on Friday, and Fridays camp at this cottage. So that's one thing. Two is be prepared. Like you either pay someone to clean your place or you are spending Sunday all day cleaning, doing laundry. So that's the other thing. And then you need to find a really good, I call him my Greg. Everyone needs a Greg.
You need a Greg.
Hi, I just got an alarm. Hey, when I was leaving, the drain was really slow. Can you just go check? Can you
love
this?
Greg.
Can you whatever? You need Greg. Everybody needs a Greg in their heart.
Let me ask you from a business perspective. Can we talk about affordability? So how do you, so, you've got probably your principal residence here that you own. And so you've got a mortgage, say. So how do we float both boats financially? Like, in other words,
buy it with the equity in your home.
So you do. So you're going to use the equity in your existing home.
That's how we did it
to
originally.
Leverage out and then go buy that, and then you'll have no mortgage on that, or
so when
because
we
you
bought
still
it
get all the
originally,
carrying costs, right?
So when we bought it originally, I mean, you only have one land transfer tax, not like the two we have in Toronto.
Yeah, you got it.
And it's considering, I mean, again, I'm not speaking to people buying $6 million cottages.
No.
Not. But if you want to get in the market and you want to buy something in like the $700,000-$800,000 range,
right?
Sidebar, I remember many, many years ago, there was an article in the Globe and Mail, and it was one of those like writing in like question back in the day when people did this. Yeah. And it was like, what am I better to do? Put my money into a cottage as an investment or put it into stocks? And the guy wrote back and said, probably stocks, but your stocks won't give you the memories that a cottage will. So there's a
You can't sit on your stocks and have a beer.
And speaking of childhood memories, my kids, there's nowhere to go. Yeah, you have a TV. Yeah, they've got screens. Yeah, fine. But there's a difference. And I remember just sitting on the dock with one of my children or both of my children, just shooting the shit. We're not having life conversations, but there is family time that I will tell you, you will never regret a mortgage payment on that cottage for the time and the memories that you have with your children. And as a family together, we had a tiny, like, I'm not joking, we bought it for $265,000.
Oh, wow.
It was a 750 square foot, 3 bedrooms. One of the bedrooms was a closet. Yeah. It had 1 bathroom. It was 2.5 seasons if we were lucky. It had a beautiful waterfront. And we bought it very similar to my advice that I give people getting into the residential market. You buy what you can afford and you build your equity. And it was not in good shape. And we had it for a few years and we redid the kitchen. And we had a few years and we redid the dock. And we had it. And anyway, we took the equity we had after having that cottage for 7 years. And we bought our forever cottage. And it is a 4-season and it has 5 bedrooms and we're very lucky to have it. And that's how you do it. And I bought it with the equity of my home originally as what someone would call a second mortgage. And then once you get far enough along, you break it apart.
Got it.
And it becomes its own entity.
So your family values thing made me cry. And I actually don't care.
Now he's never going to
No, I don't care at all.
avoid me.
I just didn't care. I stopped, like, my compassion level was like, boom. But What about Airbnb? Like, would you?
It's actually going out. Like, there are a lot of areas.
But I'm saying, like, from a financial perspective, are you going to give up those weeks in the summer?
So it's interesting you asked that, because when we bought our cottage, we bought a cottage within the means of which we didn't ever have to rent it.
Okay.
We knew people on the lake that had bought a much nicer property.
Yeah. Right.
And they had to stay home 3 weeks of the year. Right. They made their money back. Don't get me wrong. It allowed them to. It's each to his own. Right. And by the way, we waited also. Like, my husband is, said to me, I work really, really hard during the week. Everybody works hard. I always wait for the trolls, right? Like, everything I say, I'm just waiting for the trolls to say something in the comments.
Yeah.
But he said...
and I don't.
Right, exactly. But he said, I work my ass off during the week. I don't want to go to the cottage and work. I don't want to be cutting the grass. Right. I don't. So we also waited until we could afford to pay a gardener. And by the way, like, we're talking a couple $100, so please don't come after me. We wait, I didn't have a cleaning lady in the early years, but like those kinds of things. Yeah. And I think that, by the way, is part of any purchase that you decide to make.
That's why I raise it.
This works for me. Yeah. Other people, by the way, those people that bought a nicer place never did a cleaning lady, have done everything themselves. But they're also very handy. The husband, not handy, but like knows how to build stuff himself. Which, by the way, I wish we did too.
And so if my spouse or my partner,
by the way, that's my next career. If you ever, is that when I feel like I would love to do like a contractor course. No, for myself.
Oh, for
I
you.
never would.
Okay.
I'd just be like, I'd be like, I stare at my bathroom in the cottage. I'm like, I wish I could do this. So I would love to just go and remodel my own.
So the reason I raise that is because, you're making a contract with your spouse or your partner, and you're, thinking about, how we're going to manage this, right? Okay. So you're doing some planning. And I think it is important, and that's why I raise it, just to talk about, are we going to Airbnb it are we going to lose those prime weeks in the summer to get it back? Should we buy something cheaper? I mean, I think that's really important when you're talking about these recreational properties, right? Because
also wait for your neighbors to hate you.
Yeah, they're going to hate your guts, of course.
When you rent it out. Yeah. When the neighbors...
To the Hells Angels or Satan's Choice. Yeah, I got it.
But by the way, the Hells Angels are very quiet.
Yeah,
they
they're
don't
all
want
nice.
You actually want the Hells Angels. But you don't want the frat boys. So when we bought the first one, it had been a rental, and the neighbors came down and went, like, almost hugged us. We never met. They were like, thank God there's a nice young family. But I would say, first of all, Airbnbs are being... they're not legal in certain areas.
Yeah. So the one thing I was going to speak about really quickly is check, because there's all these short-term rental bylaws now. Yeah,
they're not just for condo buildings anymore.
You may have to get licensed to do it. There's all over Blue Mountains and up in Collingwood. Yeah. So please check with your realtor, or go to the town and talk to somebody about, if there are any restrictions.
For you. Yeah.
I mean, realtor's the first point of attack, because they're familiar.
Yeah, and they should be doing that for you anyway. So that's definitely one thing. I think in the sense of like going to buy something, one of the things that is important, even though, as I just said, this cottage on my lake just sold in 8 days, unless you know that lake really, really well, you spent time in it as a child, if you cannot see the water... the water quality. Yeah. I have a great story. When we bought our first cottage, my husband insisted on going for a swim. The agent thought he was crazy. He's like, I'm not buying a cottage unless I know what kind of water I'm buying. And he got in the water and swam around and came out. That is a crazy side of it. But your water level, like I've been at a cottage. I was invited 2 years ago for someone's birthday weekend. Gorgeous. Cottage was gorgeous. Piece of land was gorgeous. You could not go in the water. Like, people went in the water. It was weeds up to... Yeah, now, by the way, that may be fine for some people. It's not...
There are some lakes in the Peterborough area where they harvest rice.
Like Rice Lake? And Rice Lake is actually the weediest. People die in it every year because they fall and they get stuck in... It's crazy.
And so if you're not there at the right season, you won't see it. because it's not there, and then you may be unpleasantly surprised.
I actually think one of the best times, which is never the time that people buy because the season is over, but the best time to go is in the end of the season. So in August. Why? Water levels.
Yeah.
So there's two kinds of lakes that you can buy on, right? You can buy a closed lake.
Yeah. And
a closed lake usually feeds another river system, mostly the Trent. So, like, if you're in the Kawarthas, like the Chandos, the Jack Lakes, all go into the Trent as well. And then Halliburton Lake, Redstone, Kinesis also feed the Trent. Those water levels go from here to literally 10 feet. Yeah, like, I do not have a beach at the beginning of my season, and I have a 10-foot beach at the end of the season. Now, I love both of it. I'm fine with it. But if you, let's say, have young children and you need a beach.
Considerations. Sure.
So I think that's when, and also, by the way, that's when you see the weeds. So if there are weeds, you'll see them coming out of the water.
So now I'm going to tell you something. And so I have a few colleagues and we have tons of experience, but notwithstanding our experience, we really do talk about what's best for the clients. And the one thing I will tell you honestly is do not hire me to do your cottage deal. And I'll tell you why. I have found that local lawyers know local things. And
it's done very differently up there.
And I really encourage people, if you're buying a place in Wawa, if you're going to North Bay, look up who's on the Chamber of Commerce or speak to your realtor and get a recommendation for a local lawyer. And they really do know local things. And they might also, if you have questions about short-term rental, if you have questions about access, and I've got a few, I actually made notes for this because there are some really important things that are so different from where we live in the GTA. But I think hiring a local lawyer is super important.
Can I throw one back at you? So now I'll accuse you and say,
yeah.
I think if you have someone that you really, really trust. So by the way, I would hire you to do, if I were to buy another cottage, I would, and I'll tell you why. We put before we bought our first cottage, there was a property on another lake, Cordova. If anybody knows Cordova Lake, I'm so glad that we didn't. God was watching over us. And anyway, and we used a local lawyer, like we used a Toronto lawyer, and that I used back in my early days. And he was like, there's nothing on your deed that says you can go over this land. Right? So a lot of, the other thing is you absolutely do not buy a cottage without a survey. Absolutely not. Like, without a doubt, I will tell you right now.
You know how many problems? Like, the deck is built on the road allowance.
But by the way, but people don't,
terrible stuff.
Neighbors don't even know. I have a great story about our neighbor in our last cottage who they sold their property in Toronto and went to move up there. Yeah. I have a whole thought about that. Anyway, lovely people. And we were going to build on our original lot before we found the one that we bought. I'm so glad I didn't build. And we got the survey. There's only one surveyor in the area, okay? So he comes out. I forgot. My husband thought that I was telling them. Anyway, neither left hand, right hand didn't talk. We didn't tell them. They see the orange spokes in the ground, and the husband sends us an email. Nicest people in the world. He's losing his shit. Why? Because his house is not legal now.
Yeah.
And he was like, who did this? And lo and behold, he went by his old survey, and it was the father of the son of the same firm. Now, I think it all worked out with them, and we didn't end up building. But again, have a survey because...
So let me just tell you what a survey is.
Oh, yeah.
So when I search title... I look at the quality.
What's the title? Even go back one
quality of the title. So we do title searches on every property. When somebody comes into the office and they say they're buying a property, we do a title search to make sure there's no liens, encumbrances.
Residential, condo.
Doesn't matter what it is. But only a survey can tell you the quantity of property that you're buying. So when a lawyer tells you, this is where your property is, yes, that's where it is. But they can't really tell you, is there an encroachment? Are there easements? Is the retaining wall on the right side of the lot line? And only a survey can tell you that. And a survey is a particular document. It's sealed by an Ontario land surveyor, and it has a part 2. And part 2 on the survey talks about the various encroachments and things that they've actually found in their discoveries. And they do historical work to determine. Remember, you were talking about the orange stakes, but it's a criminal code offense to move a surveyor stake. So the surveyor stakes...
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So those stakes are there for a reason, and they are the reference point.
Every day.
They're the reference point for how those surveys are done. Super important. And the reason why I made a little list today is because, you mentioned, we've gone through a whole bunch of things, and we talk about it sort of adjacent, but look, access is a big deal.
Let's talk shore road allowance.
So how you get to the property from a dedicated road. So you may pass over 4 other properties to get to where your driveway is. But the question is, do you have the legal right to pass over all those other properties? So they all have to have mutual right of way. So every property has to be searched.
They do, but what if they don't, and then there's a grandfathered? Because there is a grandfathered exception,
Sure.
right?
So you can have these things. I just dealt with some cottage properties for a client where they had some title issues. And I said, okay, but tell me, when the Amazon guy comes, does he go this way or that way? And they actually told me, well, he goes this way. And they had a little fight with their neighbor about blocking the access, right? And this happens quite frequently.
By the way, don't ever believe, you might be like, I have the nicest neighbor, I'm never going to worry about it. No. By the way, they could, first of all, that could change.
Or they die.
Sell, and then... the very first weekend we got up to the cottage, and the neighbors was owned by 2 siblings.
Yeah.
And they ended up selling the next year. And I was like, "Hi, nice to meet you. We just bought next door." And the daughter looked at me and goes, "That's my road." She didn't even say hello. Wow.
Hi, that's
she
my
didn't
road.
Even say hello. She goes,
don't set foot on it.
That's my road. Yeah, and I was like, no, we drive over it. But she wanted to make sure that I knew that was her road.
So she spit on it.
But
it's mine.
But I think that it's important to understand we took the risk because we owned a great portion of land behind us. And if they ever cut us off, I would just build.
The other way.
No, there was no, but I would build a road. Yeah, I would have had to build a road. It was an expense, whatever.
So access is super important, and the legal right to do what you think you can do.
It's the Wild West also up there. You have to be ready.
Sure is.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned road shore allowances. Let's just talk about road shore allowances.
Road shore allowance is
66 feet around not all lakes, but some lakes in Ontario.
Is it not all?
No, it's not all.
Oh, interesting.
So and it's a band that goes all the way around the lake, and the question of who owns it. So
it's under the water.
So some of it can be under the water. That's called riparian rights, and the Beds of Navigable Waters Act applies. Forget it.
It's taking me back to my studying.
Literally, right?
15 years ago, yeah.
But in the no joke territory, can you build a dock? Can you build a boathouse? These things are all impacted by tons of different laws and legislation.
And no one checks, by the way.
You just got to be careful.
So the lawyer that dealt with us 20 years ago when we bought the first one said to me, buy the road shore allowance.
Correct. So you can purchase them from the local municipalities if they haven't done it. Yeah. But you have to be wary that you might. By the
way, when you buy the cottage, whether they own the road shore allowance.
Of course.
Because he told a story. Now, it was Simcoe, so very different, that a client had a cottage and did not own the road shore allowance. And the water levels will come down.
Folks can just...
Or ATVs coming through. So if you don't own it, it's like someone saying, well, you're not allowed to drive your boat across in front of my cottage on the water. Oh yes, they can.
And there was an enormous court case in Grand Bend. So Grand Bend is near London, Ontario. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Beautiful.
And so there was a huge, huge court case in Grand Bend about these kinds of issues. So the local people, they want to go sit in front of your cottage and have set up their umbrella and they can.
They can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing. Allotments. So there's these things called road allowances. So a road allowance is an unopened road, right? And so unopened roads, quite often, the local municipalities will allow people who live there to go and use that little section of beach. And if it's right next to your cottage, it's loud and noisy.
Yeah, I like every time I'm just so busy, I always think like I don't think I own my shore road.
Yeah. Oh, now you're worried.
No, I'm always
I'll
worried,
check.
but I always
I'll
forget.
check.
And I'm like, it's fine, but I should. But so I would say, yeah.
So
road shore
allowances,
road access,
allotments, access. Now let's talk about just random stuff. Potability and flow. So potability is, can you drink the water without getting diarrhea? And flow is when you stand under the shower.
You should be so lucky that's all that
Will the soap come off your head? So is the pressure of water,
I'm laughing
like you're standing there because
so
I'm trying to get the damn soap off. So potability and flow are real things. So
much
typically
more than in a house or a condo to be fixed for sure.
Absolutely. And so wells, is it well water? Is it that stupid, what's that system called, with
the heated water line?
No, the light. They do
infrared.
The infrared systems.
But by the way, they should all have infrared systems. If you have a well, right, you should have an infrared. So I think, listen,
so potability,
if you don't have
flow.
a well, also the other thing is like people are like, oh, is it winterized? There's no such thing as winterized.
No.
You either have a house or you don't. So if you can get water in the winter and you have heat, you have a winterized cottage. Yeah. Anybody can, but you need a well. You can do heated water lines. I wouldn't recommend it. They move, they get stuck, whatever. Wells are not cheap. There's no question. They're about $10,000, $15,000.
And the question is, and there's a thing called a well driller certificate. And if you have the opportunity, you should have the well examined.
Do not buy a cottage unless the well has been tested.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Going through like things that you would want to check. So now we've done road shore allowance,
potability, flow,
so
wells.
I would understand, yes, definitely turn all the water on and understand how you're getting the water. If it's a winterized cottage, you shouldn't have an issue. If it's a 3-season cottage, you have other conversations. And then your septic.
Oh, so I was just going to talk about my Crohn's.
Or your holding tank.
No,
you're not going to.
Oh, sorry.
But there's holding tanks, which I do not recommend.
Right.
So a holding tank is just basically everything goes in there, and then I actually don't even want to talk about it. But if you have a septic,
but we do need to talk about the age of the tank and getting it pumped out.
I would just say don't do it.
Because they exist, and you might look at a cottage.
I agree, but they do. But I think that
what's your guy's name?
Asking
is it Greg? Larry? What's his name?
Greg. But he wouldn't do septic.
No, but I call Greg and I say, "Who's the local septic guy?" And he says,
yeah.
"Oh, you got to call Bob."
Then you have someone to come. I would switch
it over.
And then
Bob comes and looks at it.
But by the way, ask how old your septic is.
Septic.
So you're going to be on a septic.
Yeah. Weeping tiles.
You would want to have something that is less than 10 years old. They usually last about 20 plus if you do not throw chemicals, etc., down your toilet and your system. Like I use all natural stuff in my cottage. I know a lot of people who don't. Yeah. But they are very expensive to replace. Correct. So that is your big, like people who go and buy like residential, it's always like, furnace, what those are $8,000. Also, okay. We're talking 25,000 plus for
newer septic beds have things called use permits that are issued by local municipalities. So there's technical
Make sure the size works for the house also.
There's technical aspects and legal aspects to all of these things that we just talked about. And I'm not putting an offer in until I'm satisfied, because you're right. I just bought this cottage and I'm stretched now. And then like 2 months later, it starts, I'm getting this waft. I can smell something. And then I call the septic dude and he says, "Oh, you need a new bed. The weeping tiles are shot." And then you're $30,000 in the bucket, right? So do your homework and again, septic systems, wells, potability and flow, road shore allowance, access. And, if you have a future use plan, like if you really say, I want to build X on this, then make sure you talk to the municipality or a local planner
That you
about
can
whether
build.
you can.
So the lawyer that we used at the time when we bought it said to us, based on the size of the land, you can future use by
You got it.
you can build up to 4,500 square
Critical.
feet.
Critical.
Now, we knew later on if we wanted to, we didn't end up doing that. But it is important, and also understanding, what the setbacks are to be able
You
to,
got
like,
it.
we built
So
a bunkie.
don't have
but
it in
that
your
was
head. You got to speak it to the realtor. You got to speak to the lawyer, and you got to do your own homework. I really mean it. Like, go to the town.
Don't get, all I will say is, and I was there, don't get sucked into that like lifestyle of, or like you're like that dock and that view, and I'll sit there and have a glass of wine or a Caesar. No. You're going to be like, sitting in front of like a house on fire. You won't care. You'll really need a drink if your
septic system doesn't work.
And we had so many times we went up there and like all of a sudden there was no hot water, and then something else, and getting these guys in an emergency.
Not so easy.
It is so hard.
And just to speak about that, like getting an appraisal done for a bank on a cottage, like generally there's only one or two bodies up there that do the appraisals. Generally,
and they're
so
very
busy in the summer.
But also, when we did ours in the summer, and I bought mine. Remember, I was an agent. I did it. I represented myself on the buy.
Sure.
I didn't take commission. I wanted it before they listed it. I went in hard, and I got a great price. And I knew the other side also. I get it appraised. They appraised it under what I paid for it.
Right.
I was like, "Are you joking me?"
No.
And so, which was fine. And you're on the hook for the difference.
And then my
that was
mortgage
fine.
broker's going like they beat them up and they talk to them and they try and get them to.
Ridiculous. So, but the point is that's it. Is that you don't
be
have
careful.
8 guys that's running around central Toronto
You sure
looking
don't.
at different. There's one guy who's like, I know everything that's going on here, and this is. And by the way, going back to them, they are not going to revise.
No, they're not going to do a thing. They're going to be mad.
I fought with them. Yeah.
So cottages are, it's definitely not like buying a condo or a house in the GTA. And
use a referral. Ask someone. Don't just look them up. Ask someone that you know.
The pitfalls.
That has used them.
We've gone through a bunch of issues. I think we've canvassed, really the planning that has to go into it, which is different than buying your principal residence. It's a different discussion that you need to have with your family, and. Hopefully you're gonna have all.
What are you gonna do with it? Yeah, we'll do another episode. But I think that buying into that lifestyle and understanding what's involved is a group effort. And listen, my kids get involved. They understand how the cottage works and how my son helps my husband put the dock in and out of and all that stuff. And I think that understanding that it depends on
and
I guess your level of wealth.
If you're gonna buy with your siblings.
No.
Do a little contract. Pretend you're strangers and make a contract. Yeah. It's okay.
It's okay if the
it
parents
says I get
own
this
it.
many weeks and you get this many weeks and we put money into a pool. Yeah, it's okay.
Oh no! Anybody I've known has always just bought each other out. It doesn't, and you can love each other. It doesn't. It just means like.
Yeah, but I want to give the litigation guys some work. So
on that note,
yeah,
thank
next
you so
time.
much.
See ya.